Hello everyone, my name is Lumad and welcome back to another Borderlands 3 build video. Today we'll be going over my Swiss Army Knife 2.0 build. The original Swiss Army Knife Moze build is one of the best multi-purpose builds for Moze currently in the game, and considering the fact that we have DLC 4 potentially around the corner, I thought it'd be a good idea to throw a fresh coat of paint over this build, considering we've had a bunch of new updates and a bunch of new weapons to play with. And also, since DLC 4 is around the corner, I thought it'd be a good idea to give you guys a flexible yet powerful build to do any content currently in the game, and also smash whatever it is that DLC 4 brings for us. I'll also be including a text write-up of this build in a Google document, alongside a few other really good Moze builds for Moze, obviously, made by myself, Prismatic and Rampant, all who have been playing Moze for an incredibly long period of time, and we have a ton of experience with her. And these builds are also updated fairly frequently, so you don't have to worry if they get out of date after a certain hotfix or patch. But with that out of the way, let's go straight into the build. So I think it's a good place to start off with is the weapons used for this build. The primary benefit of this build in particular is its flexibility to use whatever guns you want, as long as they aren't complete garbage obviously. So for this takedown run you're seeing on the screen right now, I used 4 guns. However, these definitely are not an extensive list, feel free to use whatever guns you want, these are just my personal preference. So in the video I used the Smug, the Flipper, the Mongol and the Miscreant. These 4 guns are among my favourite guns in the game, and for good reason. Since its recent buff to its amp and base damage, the Smug is a very solid weapon for Moze. Personally, I would combine this gun with a Green Monster or a Minesweeper class mod. I suggest Green Monster because of its good fire rate and magazine size, as well as its ability to boost scorching RPMs, which makes this gun a crit machine. And also the Minesweeper class mod. Being a Hyperion SMG, it's incredibly accurate, so getting crits is very easy, and therefore you can maintain that damage output using the Minesweeper class mod. The downside of this gun is that once your weapon shield takes damage, you lose the amp bonus, but on the flip side, every time you get a kill, the shield refills. So the takeaway from this is maintain your distance, use cover, and you have an incredibly accurate, powerful SMG to deal and take out any enemies in the game. So aside from that, and bearing in mind, this gun isn't the best for melee 1 takedown, just due to the sheer number of enemies and the fact that enemies are always jumping in your face. But if you maintain your distance, like I mentioned before, you can pick off enemies at a reasonable distance due to its accuracy, and just deal a ton of damage. I've also tested the Smug on stream in other areas, like Conrad's Hold and the Anvil, so basically campaign areas that are somewhat difficult due to the presence of anointed enemies or multi-bar enemies, and it absolutely shreds. So the next gun I use in this build, and to the surprise of literally no one, is the Flipper. This SMG is used heavily and for good reason. It does splash, multiple projectiles, fire fast, and has a large weapon magazine size, making it perfect for use with a Blastmaster class mod for example, as we'll see in the Wotan fight, but also works incredibly well with a Green Monster or even a Minesweeper class mod. There's not much else to say, it's just a really solid SMG and highly recommended for any Moze player. The next one on the list is the Miscreant, and this little pistol packs an incredible punch due to its crazy fire rate and high damage splash projectiles. Combine this with a Minesweeper class mod or a Rocketeer class mod, and due to the fact that they can boost torque cross promotion and Skagden, and you get a pistol capable of punching a hole in Pandora itself. So the final weapon in my loadout, but by no means the only other weapon you can use in this build, is the Mongol. It has multiple projectiles, high base damage, meaning it can clear out rooms and mobs incredibly easily, and pairing this with a Rocketeer or a Blastmaster class mod, and you got yourself a lethal rocket launcher that could smash anything you throw at it. Now, moving on from the weapons in my loadout, and some other weapons I highly recommend to use this build. Once again, these aren't the only weapons you can use, but just a few extra options for your lovely Vault Hunters to try and use. Weapons like the Ion Cannon, the Kibsworth, the Plague Bearer, and the Beacon are all incredibly solid and incredibly powerful, and feel free to mix and match these weapons to create your own optimal loadout. Now, as far as the anoints go, for the weapons, the consecutive hits and the 390 anoints are the ones I would recommend, mostly because they're easy to use and maintain. The 390 anoint pairs well with weapons that are capable of more or less one-shotting enemies, and by adding on that 390 anoint, you're basically guaranteeing those one-shots. And consecutive hits will be recommended for weapons that can fire for extended periods of time, so weapons like the Flipper and the Smug. The Splash Anoint is also incredibly optimal and can help you do a ton of damage, but personally I find it tedious to spam Iron Bear summons every 12 seconds, because for some reason the generic Splash Anoint, which lasts for a less period of time, does more splash damage than the most specific one, which lasts longer, so we're at a bit of a crossroads there. So if you truly want the most splash damage, you have to use the one that lasts for a lower period of time. So yeah, I'm just not a fan of cycling Iron Bear to keep up my anoint damage, so that's why I don't use it. However, if you guys prefer that kind of playstyle, don't let me stop you. A splash anoint is incredibly powerful and deservedly so. So now that we have the weapons out of the way, we can move to our shields. Now, there isn't much to say about the shields of this build, aside from use whatever you prefer that combines survivability with a decent DPS increase by including a bonus ASE element on it. My recommendations would either be a Transformer or an Old God shield, but as far as anoint goes, personally I prefer the CDR anoint on my shields, just to increase the fluidity of a potential Iron Bear build that you can run with this exact build. By combining an Old God with bonus health parts, or something like a Mendel's multivitamin shield if you don't have DLC 2, with this tree setup, you can have an Iron Bear build that has a decent amount of health, and combined with that class mod, you can create an incredibly powerful Iron Bear that you can complete any content with without any worries. The chosen grenade for this build is a Colonial Maddening Tracker. I'm not going to say much else with this. It's the bread and butter grenade build for Moze, and incredibly synergistic with Moze's playstyle, and this build in particular. Now we move on to the class mods, and as I said before, you can use multiple class mods within this build and still be incredibly powerful. My top 4 picks would be Green Monster, Blastmaster, Minesweeper, and Rocketeer. The Green Monster mod gives Moze an easy access to an extra element, meaning you can take out basically any enemy in the game, as well as a very nice critical damage boost through its ability to boost Scorching RPMs and Click as well. The skill distribution I recommend is 4 in Scorching RPMs and 1 in Click, as this will give you the most optimal damage boost. Bear in mind, however, weapons like the Flipper don't perform well with Click just because of the very efficient ammo economy, but guns like the Miscreant, for example, will play very well with Click, so yeah, it's honestly personal preference. Have 5 RPMs if you're using weapons that can sustain indefinitely, or have 1 in Click if you have weapons that will dip down to lower ammo reserves fairly frequently. So, with the Green Monster class mod out of the way, we get to the Blastmaster. Now, the Blastmaster class mod is a no-brainer, and with weapons that do splash and have a very sustainable ammo economy, like the Flipper, you will have incredible damage potential. Skill distribution wise, I recommend 1 in Vampire, 1 in Redistribution, and 3 in Holy Pin. Alternatively, you can aim for 3 in Vampire, 1 Redistribution, and 1 in Holy Pin, if you feel that you require extra survivability and the points you have in your tree in Vampire aren't cutting it to help you stay alive. So, the Minesweeper class mod is next up, and there isn't much else to say about this, to be honest. It's the Minesweeper class mod, and is easily Moze's best damage, and with the ability to boost skills like Tor, Cross Promotion, and Skagden, it provides Moze with a significant damage boost just through the skill boosts alone, without even factoring in its special effect of creating micronades on crits. The skill rolls I recommend is 1 in Redistribution, and then 4 in either Tor, Cross Promotion, or Skagden. However, Skagden is a bit bugged at the moment, so we don't know if Gearbox has got to fix it or not, but to be safe, I'd recommend 4 in Tor Cross Promotion, but honestly, if you want the most amount of damage you can do, get 4 in Skagden on your Minesweeper class mod. Finally, the Rocketeer class mod is solid for Moze and enables a support-based playstyle by enabling Iron Bear to stay out in the battle for extended durations of time, making it be able to draw aggro and keep Moze alive for longer. It can also boost Skagden or Tor Cross Promotion, and I recommend getting a class mod that boosts 5 in either of those. Now, I also mentioned earlier that you can use this build to run Iron Bear too, and you absolutely can. By equipping either a Bear Trooper or a Raging Bear class mod, you can confidently use Iron Bear for any content in this game and not feel crippled in your damage output, which is always great to have in a flexible build like this. As far as the stat rolls go, for a Bear Trooper class mod, I recommend 5 in Stainless Steel Bear. You don't really need those extra points that the Bear Trooper boosts in either Explosive Punctuation or Grizzled. The points you can put in the skill tree itself is more than enough. With the Ranger Bear class mod, 1 in Deadlines and 4 in Stainless Steel Bear is probably the most optimal configuration. It gives you an extra bit of duration on Iron Bear, and Stainless Steel Bear will boost your damage and armor, so it's incredibly synergistic in those skill point allocations. And now, finally, we get to the meat of the build, and that is the skill tree. So, as you can see in the trees, there really isn't anything to stand out to mention. If you've watched my prior builds and skill tree breakdown videos, you'll know there isn't really much variation in this, and most of my skill tree specs are more or less the same. A few things to point out in the Demolition Woman tree, however, is just a couple things. So, after testing, it's been found that 4 in Grizzled and 1 in Explosive Punctuation gives us the best CDR potential, CDR meaning cooldown reduction, which enables more frequent Iron Bear usage, So whether that be just using a fully fledged Iron Bear build and riding it out for the full duration, or just simply cycling Iron Bear for the annoyance, the 4 in Grizzled and 1 in Explosive Punctuation makes it very useful for Moze and gets Iron Bear back as fast as possible. As far as the points required in Holy Pin, it's entirely dependent on the class mod you're planning to use and the grenade mod you have. So let's say for example you were using a cloning maddening tracker, you realistically only need 1 point in Holy Pin due to each grenade toss having a more than 90% chance to cause a crit due to its multiple grenades and homing nature. However, if you're using a Minesweeper class mod, I highly recommend maxing Holy Pin out just because those mini micro-grenades can crit, which means the higher chance they can crit means you can create a cascade for infinitely scaling damage. So yeah, basically the TLDR of that is that if you're using a non-Minesweeper class mod, you only need 1 in Holy Pin for as long as you're using a cloning maddening tracker. However, not every Moze player has that. You might be using Spring Epicenter for example, or a Widowmaker or something like that. Those grenades aren't the best for creating multiple projectiles, so having more points in Holy Pin is more optimal. But yeah, that's the general gist of it. The points you put in Vampire is personal preference, and you can take points out of Stainless Steel Bear should you think that you require more survivability. So in the skill tree right now, I have 5 in Stainless Steel Bear, 2 in Vampire. So feel free, if you feel like you need more survivability, take a couple points out of Stainless Steel Bear and put it into Vampire. So now we move on to the Bottomless Mags tree. And once again, nothing too special. We have Specialist Bear and Scorching RPMs to boost our Iron Bear damage, and Russian Offensive to give us Lifesteal on demand. However, one thing I'd like to note for you guys is that the points in Click Click can be interchanged with Iron Bank depending on the weapons you use. So, for example, if you're using weapons that maintain a high magazine capacity almost always, like the Flipper, Click Click is a redundant skill, and you're better off putting points into Iron Bank to make use out of things like the Blast Monster and the Greed Monster. But if you're using weapons like the Miscreant or fast firing weapons that can't always stay at high magazine size for a long period of time, yeah, you can really use that. As far as Shield of Retribution goes, we have a single point in Security Bear just to increase its survivability. Meaning Iron Bear survivability, and also keep in mind that Security Bear also offers Iron Bear a flat damage reduction bonus even if its shield is down. So I always recommend putting a single point in here for any build that plans to use Iron Bear for any period of time. And finally, with all that, we reached the end of the video. So if you made it this far, I want to thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you find this build useful. As always, do let me know if you have any questions or feedback in the comments below. So yeah, take care of yourselves, hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. See ya!